My name is Laura Biasillo, and I work at Cornell Cooperative Extension of Broome County as the Ag Economic Development Specialist, and have quite a bit of experience working with setting up farm open farm events. And so just wanted to kind of offer the perspective of the educator and kind of best practices and considerations that we like to make sure that we cover or talk about. And then we'll be transitioning to MJ, who actually can offer that, actual like farmer perspective of, what it's like and things that she's experienced. And so I do want this to be interactive. There will be a few sections where I do pause and ask for your input. And so I'd love if folks wanted to use the chat to be able to offer any thoughts or perspective that you might have. So what we're going to be talking about today, as Lindsay said, is hosting one-day events, what to know. And so we'll just jump right into it. So really one of the things that I like to start out with, and, especially when we're talking with farms or when we ourselves are looking at hosting our open farm day, really the first question is why? Why do you want to do that? What's the purpose? And because anything that we do should have a purpose. So when we think about hosting one-day events, they are a great way to engage with your customers and with the community. They're also a way to provide some consumer education, potentially an opportunity to sell product. But really, your why should be really at the center of whatever it is that you're trying to do. It should be the goal. That purpose should drive the goal. So as we said, you really want to think about, what are the goals for that one-day event? And so there's many different options for that goal, and they can be multi-pronged, but traditionally what we see in terms of goals for a one-day event or on-farm events is, some mixing of all of these, which include just purely marketing the farm, product sales, as we said, consumer or customer education, and then I'm sure that there are many others. So for those of you that are on the call right now and maybe have had experience in this area, I would love to see in the chat, what your goals are for when you host a one-day event, or if you've thought about hosting a one-day event, what your goal for that event was. And I will give us a minute or so for that, and then maybe while folks are thinking, Lindsay, I'll call you out and see if maybe you'd be willing to just talk a little bit about the goal for your events that you do on your farm. And I didn't prep you, so sorry.
Oh, no worries. So I have a farm. It's called Adirondack View Lavender. And we do a couple different events on our farm. And one of the events that we do is fairies in the lavender, and the goal for that event is actually to make a kids day event that's fun, safe, interactive with for the customers with their kids, because usually people come to a lavender farm and they just pick lavender, while this one day event is really focused around the kids, and that they come in and they're able to make their own fairy garden, run around the field with fairy wings on. And the goal is for really to be kids focused and for them to have a lot of fun.
Great. Yeah, so I think you brought up a lot of the things that we hope that folks are going to be considering, which is really, not just what that primary goal is, but really, who's the type of folks that you're looking to engage with, and, what's the experience that you want folks to have. So again, when you're thinking about sort of like, why would I want to do this? What, would be the purpose? You really want to be thinking about all those different pieces of not just, the generic sort of, this is what we want to do, but really the why. So again, we want this to be fun. The goal is for it to be fun, interactive, family focused, or maybe it's adult focused. Maybe it's purely educational and there's not going to be any sales. The goal is for folks to understand what it really is like to run a dairy farm. There can be many different opportunities within that goal, but it's important from the very beginning to decide what the goal is for that one day event that you're looking to do. So next we want to talk a little bit about the considerations. So really, the very first consideration when you're thinking about hosting a one-day event or an on-farm event is the time to plan. And we always wish that we had more time than we probably do, but in terms of a timeline, when you're looking at planning these types of things, a good rule of thumb is that you want to be adhering to certain timelines, especially when it comes to marketing. So we have a rule of thumb within our office for our open farm day event that no less than 1 month before the event is going to launch, we're starting to do outreach and marketing for that event. And so if we start backing up those timelines, then, about 2 months out, we're confirming all of what's going to be happening at that event, the vendors, the other farms participating, all of those different pieces. And so that's really to say that traditionally or typically the recommendation is not 2 weeks before, 1 week before that you're going to try to throw something together, because it's just not going to be a quality experience for the customers. It's not going to be a great day of experience for you. You need to leave yourself time to plan. Then we think about marketing. So, really, how are you marketing this event? Are you using social media? Are you working with local media? Are you using flyers? If you're collaborating with other farms or other organizations who are part of this on-farm event that you're doing, whether it's a food truck, whether it is another local organization that's going to be a part of this with you, making sure that you're using all of the resources at your disposal. And so that then brings us to the opportunity to collaborate with other farms and businesses. And so that can be as simple as inviting the local honey person that maybe doesn't want folks on their farm for a variety of reasons, inviting them to come and be a part of an event at your farm. Or as we just talked about, people love having food at an event. So, collaborating with a food truck, collaborating with a local library or some other nonprofit that may be able to bring other experiences to what it is that you're trying to do. Another consideration is about logistics. So thinking about, you want to invite the public onto your farm. Do you have a place for them to park? Do you need to think about going and buying marking paint from your local Lowe's and putting lines so that people understand where they can park and should park? Do you have a bathroom? Do you have a porta potty? Most folks do not want the general public traipsing through their house to go to the bathroom. And while you don't necessarily need to have a bathroom there, it is really a good idea and good general practice, not just for going to the bathroom, but also so you're offering folks a place for them to be able to wash their hands and get clean, depending on what it is that you're doing. We already talked about food. If you don't have a commercial kitchen or you have a 20C exemption on your farm, it's always great to try to partner with somebody else to handle that food for you, and people will always hang around longer if you have food. Of course, if you are going to have food, you do have to make sure that you have a good way to deal with garbage and the recycling, because you want to make sure that the image that folks have when they're at your farm is that this is a clean place that they feel safe at. And then finally, that the scale of your event should match your farm goals. So we just kind of talked about your purpose or your goal for that event. You should really try to make sure that what you're trying to do in terms of scale really matches that. So if you're a smaller type farm, you maybe don't have the experiences that you want to offer, should match the scale of your actual kind of level of production. So those are just things that you want to think about when you're looking at, I'm thinking about planning an on-farm event. What are those considerations that I should be thinking about? We would be remiss if we didn't also talk about potential liabilities. So We know that New York is a no-fault state. We also hope that all of you are aware of the Safety and Agritourism Act that was recently passed in New York State about 2 years ago. We have had a previous webinar on that, but we can send you all out some information later. But you know, when we invite the general public onto our farm, onto our property, there's certain liability considerations that we just want to think about. So this should always be a conversation with your insurance company to find out, you know, what you can do, what you definitely cannot do. But when it comes to brainstorming about what could potentially happen so you could mitigate that risk, there will always be issues potentially around trip and fall. So especially if you have a U-pick, you know, are the rows where folks are going to be? Are there any potential holes that might need to be filled in because of animals that are digging holes in the dirt? Are there irrigation lines that maybe somebody would trip over? Are there stumps or uneven ground where somebody could potentially trip and fall? Those are things that you just want to consider so that you can figure out how you're going to address that, and whether that's signage, whether it's orange cones, whether it's you know, changing the route that folks are going to take. You just want to consider that that could potentially happen. Another potential consideration around liability would be food safety. So if you're going to have food, thinking about any food safety standards, that cold stuff needs to be kept cold, hot stuff needs to be kept hot, and everything always should be properly labeled because of allergens. Safety around animals, so especially if you have any type of livestock, but especially if you have dogs, that you allow your own, you know, farm dogs or family dogs that kind of are always around the farm with you. You know, they are animals. We can never predict how they're going to react to any one situation or around anybody else. So if it's a farm animal, making sure that your fencing is properly maintained and having signage that reminds folks that this is a working farm, these are animals. And then if you do have farm dogs or other animals, maybe, you know, keeping them in the house or keeping them in the barn so that you don't have that potential issue. This also applies to chickens, geese, ducks, any sort of pastured wandering poultry. Thinking about when customers don't stay where they are supposed to. So, you know, do you have signage that's directing folks around to the different experiences that you have? If everything is contained to one area, then, you know, it may not be as much of a concern, but folks are always curious, and so you want to make sure that, especially if you are, you know, you are a working farm, you may have farm equipment, farm machinery. We don't want folks climbing on the tractor so they can get that selfie, or doing any number of other things. So just thinking about how you can keep folks where they are supposed to be. And then I think we would also be remiss if under the potential liabilities, we didn't talk about the role of technology. So especially social media, we did talk about that as it relates to marketing. But again, this can be a potential liability because folks are always very brave online. If they didn't have a great experience, maybe they didn't understand exactly what your event was all about, and then they start going all over social media and blasting you and trolling you. So understanding, you know, this is a plus and a minus, but there is that role of technology when it comes to a potential liability in terms of hosting events. And then just a little bit about the challenges. So as we said, parking, you know, you want to think about how you're going to handle that layout, especially when we start working with farms to be part of our open farm day. We always mention to them, you know, that if you don't already have a parking lot per se, you really need to be thinking about, you know, as we said, getting that marking paint from Lowe's. It's pretty inexpensive. You can get a bottle or a can for I think about $5 or so, and that would definitely last you through quite a few events, so that you can mark out those lines so that you minimize the potential for accidents related to cars and other things. thinking about those staffing needs. So how many people do you really need to be managing on-farm event? So, maybe you need one person to help direct cars to park. You want to have somebody that's at your kind of where you're selling product. You want to have somebody that can be that first interaction with folks when they come, to where everything is, to welcome them and, direct them to where they want to be, and then whatever activities you're going to have. You want to think about layout. So, where are you actually going to put all of these activities? Is everything going to be centered around a certain area? Is the farm laid out in a certain way where it makes sense to kind of move people through, or is it sort of just a free-for-all? And then, as we said, bathrooms, yes, you definitely need one. When it comes to hours of operation, we really recommend that you have really great signage that's as clear as possible, because unfortunately, once you do something like this, if it's outside of your traditional hours of operation, then folks may suddenly think that they're able to come at that same time whenever they want. Thinking about activities, how many is too many and how many is not enough. You want to have that happy medium really related back again to your goals. So if it's about consumer education, maybe you really just want to have a tour, a farm tour, and you want to have, some type of activity where folks are able to engage with that animal or that product through some type of hands-on experience. Sometimes too many is too many. Or there's a certain number that's too many. And then finally, one of the challenges really is dealing with how you handle dealing with children, the elderly and handicapped, especially in how you're laying out what's happening at your farm. We're definitely not saying that your farm has to be concerned about ADA compliance. You are a private business, but in thinking about, especially if you're looking to be inviting families or folks that are older or may have some walking or mobility challenges, you just want to be considering how you can maybe modify what's happening at the farm, or can there be certain areas that will be more accessible than others. Not everything always has to be 100%, but we want to be as accessible and welcoming as possible. And so this is just something that's a challenge, but also a consideration, because we're not saying that you need to be all things to all people, but especially if you want to be bringing these different populations to some type of an event, and where people are going to park and then where they may need to be going is going to be further away. Do you have the option or the opportunity to run a gator that could transport folks that maybe have some mobility challenges, or just making sure that your signage is very clear to say things like there is uneven ground, please pay attention, those types of things. And so with that, I wanted to open it up for any questions that folks might have, or